This episode was produced in cooperation with the ETH Entrepreneur Club, a student organization which aims to inspire, educate, and empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. The ETH Entrepreneur Club holds more than 40 events every year, resulting in an impressive alumni list of successful startups. If you want to keep up with their busy agenda, make sure to give them a follow on social media.
The opportunity should be big enough that you don't need a calculator.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Sylvan.
Caspar, a very well welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Glad to be here, Sylvan.
You are the co-founder of On, the fastest growing sports company in the world, often cited by the media. And you're a Swiss-based company that sells running shoes, but now also lifestyle shoes, basically, and also apparel, and was founded with the mission to make running fun again. We're going to talk about your journey, and I would like to start with your personal background. You studied at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland, and despite the content there, the studies, you always worked besides studying there. And I think that was a crucial moment for you. Can you talk a bit more about how that actually shaped you and what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a choice. I had to pay for my studies myself. So, in fact, at the time, quite a lot of students had jobs, and we were actually all a little proud that we weren't just students, but it was in the old system, of course. I had between my maturität and the university, I had worked as a journalist, and I continued that, and I realized that actually, if I do something that I enjoy, it pays a lot better. So I worked as a journalist, moved into PR, did some consulting on the side, mostly connected to sports, and that's also where I met Olivier, my partner. In On.
Can you talk a bit how that meeting happened? Like, what was the circumstances that you met Olivier?
Yeah, so I was head of media relations for Ironman Switzerland here in Zurich, and Olivier would always win the race. I think he won it 6 times or so. So I remember one day after the finish, he basically came up to me. He's like, "Look, hey, I know you're doing all the media stuff. Can't you do my media relation as well?" And I said, sure, we'll start. And because I was studying St. Gallen, he lived near St. Gallen. It was actually very convenient. And about 2 months later, he asked me to become his agent, which was a little bit, a surprise. I was 21 at the time. And I was like, hey, I have no experience. I'm not sure I can do this. But he's like, yeah, but you have your economics background. You should be able to do it. And I remember we sat down at my then girlfriend's place on the lake Lake Constance, and we were so excited. We both had a glass of wine to celebrate the occasion, but we were both athletes at the time, and after a glass of wine, we were both drunk. So it was a pretty funny moment. I don't quite remember what we discussed, but we had a very cool relationship. I did that for about 3 years, and he became world champion twice. He had the best years of his career, and I was able to be part of that. And we traveled the world together. And now, almost 20 years later, we're traveling the world together still, or again, and we're often having a good laugh about the good old days.
So that was basically the foundation of your co-founder relationship. Your other co-founder, David, you met him at your consulting time at McKinsey. Can you talk more a bit how that happened and why you decided then to also, join the same route together and work together in the future?
Yeah, David and I, we met in 2001 at McKinsey, and we actually did a project together. We just got along very, very well. And about 18 months or so into my job at McKinsey, I decided to get a PhD, which a lot of consultants do. And I went back to university, while I was at the university again, writing my PhD, David left McKinsey to go and work for Young Rubicam, branding and advertising agency. So he asked me to help him out. He's like, yeah, you're a student now again. You have time. Can't you come in 1 day a week? It was a little bit of a turnaround case. And it turned out that I came in more like 2 or 3 days a week. And then I realized, hey, this is actually a lot more fun than consulting. And I never went back to McKinsey, and then I joined Young Rubicam and David, and I worked there together maybe 2 to 3 years. Before he left, I took over his role as a managing partner. And when On then became a topic, maybe we go into that in a minute. Basically, I felt this is such a big challenge. We need the best possible team, and the three of us, we're very diverse in our interests and skills, and we felt that would be a good start.
Awesome. We talk about that story in a minute. What I want to talk about first is also your entrepreneurial motivation. Your dad was also an entrepreneur himself, and you always wanted to become an entrepreneur, but you chose to go to McKinsey, and then you also worked for another company. So where did that desire to be an entrepreneur, to have your own company come from?
Yeah, it was definitely running in the family. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, and my dad, and that spirit probably was just something that I always had. And also, I just don't like it if people tell me what to do. So I wanted to be independent. At the same time, McKinsey was a very good start into the work life. I mean, obviously, I was basically an entrepreneur during my studies. When I was never employed. I always was a freelancer. But McKinsey just was a great learning experience. But it was also something I like to do stuff myself, and I like to move things. And as a consultant, you're always just giving people advice, but you never take responsibility, and you never really change things, or hardly ever. And so in advertising, I was able to do that. But there was always this burning desire to have our own baby. We just didn't have an idea, or I just didn't have an idea that I thought was good enough. And you need an idea to start a business.
And I think then Olivier came with an idea, right? That he pitched to you.
Yeah, and actually Olivier one day called me, and he told me, hey, I co-invented this running shoe, and I need help in marketing. And I told him right there on the phone that it was a very stupid idea, that he didn't stand a chance against the big brands like an ASICS or Nike or Adidas. And he should not waste his time nor mine. And absolutely not would I ever help him. And he insisted, and I remember we met not too far from here in Zurich West. And he brought the prototype. And when I saw it, I was very much intrigued. I was like, wow, here's a technology that you can see. And he asked me to put it on. And I remember very vividly how I walked around the conference table, and I had never walked like this before. And I was like, wow, you can not only see it, but you can also feel it. And, for a lot of people in marketing, you're always looking for a point of differentiation, right? A unique selling proposition, a unique communications proposition. And basically, we were at the time doing some work for telecoms company. And basically, our point of differentiation was, hey, if you send 100 SMS text messages, you get a free movie theater entry. That's the level of where we work. And here you had a consumer product that was completely different. So that definitely got me intrigued.
But then still now you see the new technology, the better product, but you would still take it up with the big players if you decided to go down that path. So what made you to take the leap and to actually say, yes, let's do that. Let's give it a shot, and let's go for it.
Yeah, first of all, we were pretty timid, so it took us from that moment until we actually went out on the market within almost 2 years. We just want to be sure that the excitement and the benefits that we got from the product was actually shared by other people. So we did go to events. For example, we went to Allemann, Switzerland, and we had a booth there, and we had about 200 people test running the shoes. And the response was overwhelming. People came back with wide open eyes and like, hey, these shoes are so great. And I remember one German lady actually came back from her test run. She was like, this feels like running on clouds. And that's actually where then, CloudTec and then our claim and everything came from. So that wasn't invented by us, but that was actually someone that tested the shoes. So yeah, we were definitely very convinced of that, that the technology was superb and it was superior. At the same time, we also knew that the running space was just gigantic. It's a very, very large market. I once heard a quote by someone basically said, look, the opportunity should be big enough that you don't need a calculator to quantify it, right? And this is actually true for the running market. So something like 20 billion just in US dollars, just for running shoes. We don't need it. You don't need a calculator. If you just get 1%, you're fine. You're good. And so we actually never did any market research, or we never looked at market sizes. We never wrote the business plan in that sense. All we had was a budget, and that's how we started.
And what's really striking here is you basically tested, like, as we know it from software companies, you had like your own MVP with the people testing, the 200 runners testing your shoe, and you got positive feedback. So what happened after that? How did you then make the next step of saying, hey, the feedback is good, the market is large enough? What happened afterwards?
Yeah, so first of all, it's a big difference to have a product to being a brand. And David and I, we come from the branding world, and we understand that very well. So basically, we wanted to create a brand. So obviously you need a name, you need a design, a logo, and for us it was very important that we tap into the potential of Swiss design, which is very reductionist. And we then brought on board a designer. Actually, we had a competition between different designers. And the person that at the end won that competition was a very close friend that we almost didn't include into the competition because we didn't want to endanger our friendship. So Thilo Brunner has been on board for more than 12 years now, and he's one of the key people that made On into what it is with his team of now, I don't know, 20, 30 people. So that was one step. And then the other step, we had never manufactured anything. So we had to find a factory. And we originally started looking in Korea, and we went to China. And basically we asked people that knew somebody and we visited a couple of factories, and at the time nobody was very interested in bringing on a brand that would maybe do 10,000 pairs a year. And they were like, all the brands tell us that, they're going to be millions of pairs, but, nobody ever makes it. But hey, we found someone, and we started, and that's how it took off.
What's also a big question here is about the timing. Some people say there's no right timing. Other people say the timing is crucial for the success of your startup. So why was the right timing to then really, start and found On back in 2010? Like, what was the right timing? Were there any thoughts or discussions about that?
Not really.
You just went with the flow.
Not really. I mean, look, from a personal point of view, all three of us, David, Oli, and myself, we all had just bought a house, and we had huge mortgages on it. David and I, we were leaving very highly paid executive roles for basically nothing at On. So from that point of view, the timing definitely wasn't right. I think 2008 was a financial crisis. So, from that point of view, maybe not the right time either. Actually, we came onto the market with a highly cushioned injury prevention product just when everybody was talking about barefoot running and you don't need shoes at all. Mm-hmm. So the timing wasn't right from that perspective either. But somehow we prevailed.
Also, what led you to that decision, to leave the well-paid corporate job and not do it on the side and test some things first, but then actually take the jump and focus on it full time? Yeah. That was also a huge risk that you took for you and also your families, basically, right?
Yes, but that's something that I would recommend everybody not to do it part-time or not do it in the evenings or on the weekends. We were like, okay, we don't want to fail because of a lack of effort. We want to give it our best, and then maybe it doesn't work out. But we don't want to say, hey, well, if we had more time. And at the same time, of course, because we did have these high-paid jobs and we had other offers, we wanted to make sure that everybody focuses. Actually, in our shareholder agreement, the first shareholder agreement that we just made between the three of us, it's clearly stated that we have to devote 100% of our time. Oli had to do 80% because at the time we still had a coaching business. And we could not take any outside offers. We could not take any outside money. And if somebody had done that or had left the company early, say after a year or so, we would have lost all our shares. So we really want to say, okay, all in. Let's try for 2 years. If we fail, we fail. And we always joked, if we fail, we go back to work.
Sure. So basically from that perspective, you couldn't really lose too much if you put it that way.
This is, so, we're talking 2008 when we were having these discussions. It wasn't like being an entrepreneur was the cool thing back then. The cool thing was to go and join UBS, investment banking, or being a consultant. So the notion of starting a business, leaving a well-paid job, leaving a career was difficult, and there was some social stigma around. And I remember telling business friends, or even at dinner parties, hey, we're starting a company. We're gonna make running shoes. I remember people just their eyes going blank, and just basically, it's almost like they canceled me from their Rolodex, from their contact list. Like, this person is no longer useful to me. And these people, then for 3 years, I never heard from them. And they're the ones that then they're reaching out, like, hey, do you want to have lunch? It's not like I have time for lunch in Zurich anymore these days, because I'm usually traveling around the world. But, the same people that, you basically cancel, you then came back 3 years later because they, I was wrong, right? Of course, now our interests have moved on. But that was definitely a fear of kind of like dropping out of the business world.
And how did you deal with that? I can imagine that this is also quite some psychological pressure that you face in that moment, and it's not so easy to go through and really, live with it to a certain degree while still working on your venture.
It was actually very cleansing and very refreshing, because basically you go back to basics. There was a time, I would say around 2013, June 2013, when my balance on my bank account was the same as when I left university. It was zero. And I've never felt freer.
Why? In what way?
It's just, how does the song go by Joplin? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, right? That's what it is. And, if anybody thinks they can be an entrepreneur but not go into a zone where it really hurts, it's just not going to happen.
Well, I think these stories, it's always interesting and fascinating to see that to every success story, there are also stories where there were really tough times. And I think that's important to show to people, hey, there are always two sides of the story.
Yeah. But consider this now. Obviously, things are very, very good now. They might change at some point again. But when are you really able to take risks? If you're holding on to something, then you cannot take risks. And so obviously when you start, you want to be able to take enormous risks. But that's something that if you want to be successful and evolve a company, and not just, continuously evolve, but also again make step changes, you want to be able to take risks. So actually one of the tools that successful investors have is that they give founders personal wealth so that they're free to take risk again. Because the worst thing is that you build something and maybe it's worth 10 million. and you own 10-20% of that. So, you're, by any standard, you're rich. But you're so afraid that you're going to lose that because it's all tied in the company that you're no longer being innovative.
True.
As an investor, they take 20 bets and they want one that goes to $1 billion. And for that, you need to take risks. So to align interest, give founders liquidity so they have they pay off the mortgage or whatever they need so they can take risks again.
I think that's a very refreshing perspective. Do you think that this happens enough in the Swiss startup ecosystem?
No, not at all. Swiss investors are, not very experienced. And they're, in general, not all of them, but many of them are, the trees don't grow into the sky. Let's stay humble. Let's stay modest. They read somewhere 20 years ago, skin in the game, right? So you want to keep them small. It's a very different mindset in the US and in China as well.
We're also going to talk about that mindset later in that episode because I think that's a crucial part of how you are set up and run your company. Let's go back to the product launch. So we talked about the early days now, also from the psychological perspective about the difficulties also of starting your own company back in 2008 to 2010. So I also am a bit more curious to learn more about how you actually bring a product into the market. So you found the producing company. What happened then? How did you build trust with them that you're actually a partner that they should work with and that there's also a growing business coming up?
Yeah, so, that on the manufacturer side, it's pretty easy. You just pay everything up front. So, there wasn't a lot of trust. But that's just how they operate. In the beginning, it's very transactional, but we then actually stayed with that partner for a while. And now the current partner, obviously, he's now one of many, but we've been with them for about 8 or 9 years. So, I mean, making a product is one thing, but actually bringing it to market and selling it is a very different thing. And that's where a lot of really good ideas die because it's a technology, an innovation. At best, it's a early prototype, but it's not a market-ready product, nor is there a sales and marketing organization. And we basically did two things. First, we got very, very lucky that at the dinner party, I met someone that worked for ISPO. ISPO is the world's largest sporting goods fair, held in Munich, Beijing, and somewhere in America. They give out every year an award for the most innovative new brand called ISPO Brand New Award. And he invited me to participate. I had heard of ISPO, but I had no idea. I had never been. And so, we put together a video and one of our early prototypes we sent to the jury. And sure enough, December 20, 2009, I get a phone call. You guys won. And we're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then, basically what you win is you win a booth at the fair. I didn't think, much of it. And I went on Christmas vacation. I went skiing. And when I got back, I had a couple hundred emails because they had sent out their press release and we had, I think, 200, 300 emails from potential distributor partners, retailers, consumers from every continent. Wow. What we hadn't known is that ISPO Brand New Award is so well known that a lot of people follow it. So brands before us that have won it are GoPro, for example, or Nixon, Crocs. So brands that actually then went to being billion-dollar companies, went public and so on. So, we're maybe a little naive. So I remember us then, preparing for the show and we drove there and we walked into these halls and in Switzerland there's not even a compound that big. And we walked in there and every hall had huge posters, hundreds of on posters. And I'm 192, but I felt like tiny and I would have loved to just turn back and go out. So, we didn't have pricing. We didn't have, we didn't know, how we would sell them, where we would sell them. We hadn't even fully signed up our manufacturing. And there we were, and everybody wanted these shoes. And we left the show with about half a million Swiss francs in orders.
Wow.
So that was one thing. The other thing was that while the runners really liked the product, retailers were like, no, this is not a running shoe. We know what a good running shoe looks like. At the time, everybody was using the same technologies, double density EVA, basically, with, posted shoes that change the way you run, always like inserts. And the good running shops, they wouldn't even want to meet with us. So, we would send them prototypes and they would be like, we called them like a week later. They hadn't even unpacked them, hadn't even tried them. So we changed it and we said, okay, we're not going to talk about the shoes. And we're not going to send out shoes. We're only going to go running with people. So Olivier and I, basically traveled, around the globe going running with running store owners. And I would say 90% of the people that we ran with then placed an order. And that's how the brand grew.
So they had to use and feel the product to fully get the whole advantage behind it.
Hey, and look, I don't blame them. I was the same. Like I told Olivier, hey, forget it. Don't even show up. It's sometimes I miss these early days where we would get this like pushback. I remember I traveled for one particular retailer. I flew to Boston 3 times before he would even meet me. I flew there just to meet that person, and he was in the building and he didn't show up to the meeting.
Wow.
That rejection kind of, that gave us a lot of energy.
But what kept you going there? Was it like a challenge, that is a bit also linked to your sports background where you say, hey, this is a challenge that I like want to go after and want to solve? And maybe also like win the game to a certain degree, or what motivated you to fight this huge rejection that you faced?
For sure. I mean, everybody needs a little bit of thorn in their side, to keep them sharp. And not just on the retail side, in other areas. So everybody has like these challenges, and you make it your personal challenge and it becomes a game. And it's not about being right. In the end, if it's a partnership. If we had the same in Switzerland. I mean, Markus Riffel didn't give us an appointment in the first 4 years. And now they're our biggest account in Switzerland. So yeah, that definitely. But besides that, we did get a lot of interest. We did get a lot of positive feedback, and we always had a lot of consumer demand. So I wouldn't say we were always just going against, resistance, but we also had a lot of tailwind.
And also a very good product. I mean, that's probably also important, right?
Yeah. I mean, some people, I think in the beginning was like a love or hate product. Like, we would get 30, 40 people like being absolute fans and fans, similar to an iPhone, where there were moments where somebody would walk into a running store on a Saturday, see someone else being helped into a pair of Ons, and just walk over and say, don't even listen to this salesperson. You have to buy these shoes. There were so many moments like that. So for sure. But then also some people just outright hated the product. And for many people, the product didn't deliver the quality that it was supposed to. So like, elements would break, they would squeak. The uppers would come apart. I mean, there were many things that weren't right, but we had enough hardcore fans that, we were able to stay afloat and keep going and get the product to where it is now. And, if I now look at the shoe from 2009, 2010, I'm like, really? That's how we started. That's what got people interested. That's the foundation. It's hard to believe. It's only 11 years now. Yeah.
What comes to mind there is, I think there's a concept called 100 true fans. I'm not sure if it's like attributed to Seth Godin or anyone of that sort, but he says like, you need to recruit your first 100 true fans. And this sounds like very much that you did that to then scale beyond that, because if you have 100 true fans that really love your product, they will share it with word of mouth and you can grow from there.
I don't think we ever looked at it this way, but we were very aware of how in the performance space, how opinions are formed. And we definitely learned from other industry. For example, I'm a very passionate snowboarder and surfer. And I've basically just learned how brands are built in these core stores. Or maybe if you look at how the full suspension mountain bike came about, when the first suspensions came out, everybody dismissed this. Well, you're losing energy. Nobody's ever going to go fast in this. And the person that actually put full suspension mountain bikes on the map for racing was Thomas Frischknecht. That co-designed the brand, a bike with Scott, and then became world champion on it. And I was aware of these mechanisms, and we tried to get good runners into the shoes and good retailers. And basically then the opinion leaders, they would spread the message and it would trickle down. And so we spent a lot of time in the early years, I would say the first 3-4 years with them, because it has that trickle down effect. And pretty much everybody that now runs in a pair of On, you could probably trace that back to one of the runs that Olivier and I did back in the day.
So you really understood the market and invested the time to get that right.
If you're enjoying this episode of Swisspreneur, please don't forget to rate our show on Apple Podcasts. It helps us do bigger and better things, and to do them all for free. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Let's also look at your internal organization, building a company and launching a product from scratch. Then you also grow as a company. So how do you organize yourself internally as a company? What's important there to have a well-running and well-functioning company?
We always wanted to build it so it was scalable. And in the beginning, it comes down to very difficult decisions. How much do you invest in the now and how much do you invest in the future? And for example, we introduced an ERP early on, and at the time that was a big investment when we didn't know whether we would ever have the volumes that would justify it. Now, then at the time that was Salesforce. About a year ago, we reached actually the limit of what Salesforce can handle. The system can no longer handle our volumes. Even when you do an Excel sheet and you reach the limit of lines that it can do, it's a pretty cool feeling. And you broke Salesforce because you're just too big now.
I'm sure there are not many people or companies that can say that.
Well, Salesforce will probably say, well, you guys should have set it up differently. But,
sure.
So we're now at a stage where, we had to consider, do we go to SAP or, we're actually going with Microsoft Dynamics. But, that's, for us hopefully going to enable us to scale again, towards the future. But one of the things that we said early on is like, if we do something twice, let's automate it. So that was the mindset. So we never started working with Excels to track things. So we always build systems, and we do it to this day. And we didn't expect this to scale this much. So to give you an idea, pretty much since the start, the compound annual growth rate was 85% over the first 10 years. So it's pretty much like in that tale when somebody asks for a grain of rice on a chessboard to be doubled, and the king laughs at the beggar, and then when he realizes it's more than the world's production of rice. We're basically going through that right now, and the way it scales, we could never do it with automation.
On the other hand, you also face challenges in doing things that you weren't really experienced to do before. So there was also like challenges where you probably had to ask for help from the outside, from other people. How do you go about that?
Yeah. So this is something that I learned at McKinsey, that if you do something for the first time, you ask someone who has done it before. That's a standard thing. That's the first thing you do. Versus as a student, you're afraid to even ask a question, right? Yeah. So with this experience and this mindset, basically whenever we needed to do something, we ask someone. And we're very grateful for all the good advice and help we got. And we're trying to pass that on. We get asked a lot, so it's sometimes hard to find the time. But whenever we can, we try to let people share into our experiences. Not that that's the perfect way to do it, but maybe avoid some mistakes or have at least a starting point or one option on the table. You can always put more options.
So I think that's a good takeaway. Really encourage people to go out and ask for help if you do something for the first time or don't know where to continue. What's also, interesting is your organizational setup. You don't have an official CEO title. You are, I think, 5 equal partners that are part of the management team. Why did you decide to go for that setup and not really have like a CEO and really focus on these flat hierarchies?
In the early years, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that needs to get done, and when maybe as a business student, you look at these corporates and you have the chairman and the CEO and, they're in the media and it sounds like, they're deciding everything, right? That's definitely not the reality of a startup. It's literally just have to get shit done, and a lot of it. And there's very little bossing and very much doing. The 3 of us, we realized very quickly that we were always the bottleneck. Even, it's a unique situation that you have 3 people, as partners. But still we realized we need more capacity or more bandwidth. And what we did then, and this was late 2012, we realized we needed to bring more good people on board. And we took a very crucial decision, and it could have gone either way, but we decided not to build below us, but next to us. So we brought in a CFO and a COO as equal partners. And that probably set us on this journey. And maybe in the early years, some of us would have liked to have like a CEO title and be more important. But with the setup that we now have is that, for a manufacturing partner, if our COO travels to Asia to meet with them, he is the top ranking person at On. So they bring out the red carpet and, the owner comes. When I go and meet with an important retailer, say Nordstrom's in the US, because I show up, their owner family, or at least the CEO comes to the table as well. So, we just have a lot of important people versus you have one important person that is always stretched. Then also, the decision making, there's a lot of decisions being taken on every day, not just amongst the 5 of us, but we try, this is a very Swiss principle that I don't think Swiss companies necessarily live very well, but in the way we organize our democracy, we have subsidiarity. So we push decisions to the lowest level because these people will know what really works for them and how much investment is justified versus someone doing it centrally, like in France. Mm-hmm. So that's a principle. So you could start with us as an intern, and the next day you take decisions. And that is something that is still true to this day. So decision making is very very broadly distributed. And we don't see now that it has worked so well why we would even want to have a CEO.
It sounds like it gives you a lot of good advantages, so it does make sense to change. Talking about the culture, what role do your Swiss roots play? I mean, you're now active in a very international way, but you still seem to have this Swiss image, these Swiss roots. So in what way do you combine the Swissness with the hunger for internationalization or growth, basically?
Yeah, so the internationalization had to happen because running shoes is something that you need scale for, just to be relevant for you manufacturers. So the Swiss market alone wouldn't be big enough for us to I mean, yeah, maybe, at the market share that we have now in Switzerland, we could be just a Swiss brand, but it was not enough to start. So that was actually a blessing. We started in 5 countries on day one. So we always joked we're the smallest, international corporation. And, we had all the complexity early on, but it also helped us to develop a blueprint for internationalization. So of our volume, about 95% is now outside of Switzerland, and the largest markets are the US, Germany, Japan, and we hope that China will be in the top 3 very soon as well. So, so we are a very international brand, and we had to learn very quickly how these markets work, and all of them work very differently. Germany and the US have very little in common in terms of how business is done there. I think the Swiss mentality and Switzerland having 4 cultures helped us a lot being more sensitive to cultural differences, not coming and saying, hey, this is the Japanese way of doing business or the US way of doing business, which a lot of US companies do, or Japanese as well. And that's why they sometimes fail in certain environments. And we were adapting to the local business culture. At the same time, the Swiss values in terms of a certain conservatism, frugality when it comes to finances, a passion for quality, precision, innovation. These are things that resonate extremely well in other cultures. And that are important in how we operate as a business. So, imagine now 2010 to 2020, it was a time when many startups felt like they never had to even make money.
Yeah. Scale and grow at all costs, right?
Exactly. Many of these companies don't today, you look at WeWork or Uber, don't have unique economics that make sense. It doesn't make sense to charge $20 for a cab ride and pay a driver 25. Yeah. But these companies are multi-billion-dollar companies and they are public. We took a very different route. We said we're only entrepreneurs, we're only business people if we make money. So that was a very important goal, and we broke even in 2014, and we've growing profitability ever since. That's a very unsexy way of doing business, from an American or Chinese perspective. But we stuck to it, and now we're super, super happy because sure enough, 2018 came and the business environment changed. And if you're not profitable today as a company, you're in big trouble. So, we also felt being profitable was a way to control our dynasty. And, so, we're happy we did it the Swiss way. If you read, the media in Switzerland, we're often being criticized as being so ambitious and overambitious and maybe not modest enough. And, these guys dream big. And, there was an article in Tagesanzeiger just 3 weeks ago, and the opening line was basically a joke about, nobody ever, accused On of being too modest or not being ambitious enough, right? Changing perspectives. If we talk to the New York Times or, if we talk to business partners in China, they're accusing us of being too conservative, typical Swiss, right? So I think having both sides dreaming big and being inspired by what's possible, that also comes from us, all 5 of us on the executive team, but also the wider group. We probably, between us, do 6 to 12 overseas trip each every year. So, I spend a lot more time in Tokyo and New York than in Bern or Geneva or St. Gallen. In fact, about 50 times or 100 times as much in the last 10 years. I think I've been to Bern once. But I've been in Tokyo at least 20 times. And I've been in New York over 100 times. So obviously that shapes you. So I'm not thinking from a perspective of even Zurich. If you go into the subway in London or in the subway of Tokyo, there's a lot of sneakers. And you just look and you're like, hey, I see a lot of swooshes. I see very little Ons. So maybe, a 10-fold increase wouldn't be so crazy. Mm-hmm. And so, we're allowed to dream big.
That changes your perspective, I can imagine.
Very much so. But then, you come back and my typical travel route for many years was I would fly on a Monday, I would fly to New York. Mm-hmm. And then I would, over a week, would fly west. So I would go, New York, Boston, Chicago, Denver, LA, San Francisco. I would finish meetings in San Francisco or Seattle on a Friday and then fly to Tokyo over the weekend, and spend 3-4 days in Japan and then come back to Zurich. Mm-hmm. So that trip, Tokyo to Zurich, was always like, okay, you land and you think, okay, what happened? You land in Zurich and you drive into town and you feel like, was there a bomb scare or is there a national emergency? Because nobody's in the street. There are no people.
Where are all these people?
Yeah, where did people go?
Yeah.
But then you come back, and I live in the Engadin, in La Punt, a town of 600 people. So typically my drive would then go not just into Zurich, but then I would land in the morning and go skiing. And then you have that quiet and the ability to focus. And then I go, wow, there's this world out there and all these huge markets and millions of potential On users. We currently have about 10, 12 million people in Ons around the world. But then you have the quiet and the focus to actually then build the product. So it's a really good balance to not always be so exposed and to all the hype and everything. In the US, everything has to happen next day. You know, you hire someone or you want to hire someone and they're like, oh, you know, I don't think it's going to work out. I can only start 2 weeks from now. And we're used to waiting 6 months for someone. Sure. So, I think there are good things in the different cultures. We try to combine the best, with our Swiss roots.
It also sounds like you as a person really live that, like half a month you're traveling, see the global markets, if possible now because of Corona, a bit more difficult. And the other half you focus with the quiet time to think, to focus and to really work and deliver.
Yeah. I mean, I could never live in New York. I could never live in Tokyo. It's very inspiring, but after a week I go absolutely crazy and I have to go back and I have to reconnect and be in my space and, But the good thing is you now, obviously physical travel, but also now all these contacts that we've built up, they're very deep relationships. And some people actually appreciate that we made all these efforts and we did travel. So now, for example, when the pandemic happened, and when the US shut down, I remember it was a Sunday when it was announced that they would shut down. I got a lot of calls from people in the US, very important retailers, CEOs of large companies that called me and made the effort. I got a lot more calls actually than from Swiss partners or even European partners. So yeah, you can live in both worlds. Just have to try not to get too crazy.
You mentioned the potential. You saw many swooshes on the sneakers of people. Let's talk about competitors for a second. There are Nike, Asics, Adidas. How do you handle them? How do you deal with them? Is there even any competition from your perspective?
So in the beginning, we basically, we could just grow and whether the market grew or we took market share from someone else. I mean, it was so minimal that they definitely didn't feel it. And we never really looked left or right. We just did our thing. Then maybe 4 years ago in Europe and now definitely in the US, the picture is changing. And for example, in Germany, we now overtook Adidas in their home market, which, probably doesn't, make people in Herzogenaurach very happy. I imagine. And obviously we are in contact, loosely in contact. I think in the US, definitely the people in Beaverton have realized that we're around, and that we're actually gaining market share very rapidly. We're now the number 4 or 5 brand in the US, and growing at a very high rates, triple-digit growth. So yeah, it is becoming a little bit more competitive. Having said that, it's very friendly, and the people in the industry get along extremely well. We're all in it because we love sports. We love to do sports together, and it's definitely not cutthroat. It's not banking.
Yeah. So you could also go for a run together.
We do, yeah.
Nice.
And we can have a beer together, and we can have a good laugh and learn. And look, as a smaller brand, an owner led brand, we can be courageous. We can be innovative. We can take risks. And sometimes we do stuff like we just launched a sustainable product that is only available by subscription, where actually people from all the big brands reached out to us and said, hey, we're so glad you guys did this because we had the same idea, but we couldn't push it through the organization. People, just too much red tape, too much, this is how we do things. We cannot disrupt ourselves. As a smaller brand, we can still do that.
Awesome. Let's also talk about 2 supporters that, accompany you along the way. One is the very international investor base that you chose early on. So in what way has also the internationalization, that part, your investor base, helped you to build a successful company?
Look, when you build, and especially when you scale a company, you need capital. I remember one notable meeting when we tried to get a loan from a bank. I'm not saying which one. We had a meeting, and the three of us we were not youngsters. We were not just coming straight out of university. We had a pretty deep educational background. We had worked at McKinsey. We had executive roles, but this person that wanted to give us the loan or didn't want to give us the loan basically said, "Don't you guys have like a rich uncle that could guarantee for the loan?" Like literally. And I mean, the guy was just a stupid asshole, right? And actually, we then later, we actually have a very good relationship with that bank. But actually, the CEO later apologized for that moment. But this is something that maybe other entrepreneurs will see. So yeah, going that route is very, very difficult. At the same time, there's a lot of money in the world, and a lot of that money is in Switzerland. So I mean, we'd always joke in the beginning, there's a lot more money in Switzerland than ideas. Maybe different in Berlin, you have a lot of ideas, or you had, and not so much money. But if you have a good idea, it's easy to find money. And especially now that everybody wants to be involved with startup and it's a sexy thing, people are willing to give you money and give you money at good terms. So we started, and we actually I asked two friends of mine that I had studied with that were in banking how we should approach fundraising, and both of them said, "Hey, if you're willing to quit your job, we're gonna invest with you." So our fundraising was literally one lunch, and we were able to start. And I'm eternally grateful for these two people that they were so forthcoming. And out of this group, more friends of friends joined. And then as it happened, some of these friends had a little bit deeper pockets, and new people. But it was all very Swiss-based. And we also realized at some point that the Swiss mentality was starting to hold us back. We had one family office that was uncomfortable in a role, even though they only had 20%, that they were supposedly the lead investor, and they would only normally do public investments. And it came to a point where we agreed that it would be better to go separate ways because they were holding us back. And that's when we tapped into the Anglo-Saxon world of finances. And one thing that we discovered is valuations are twice what they are in Switzerland, which is great, because you get diluted, you get less, and ticket sizes are much bigger. And then as we grew in the US, all of a sudden Chinese investors got more interested. And through all of this, we were able to retain control. And that's very, very important. So we're still controlling our own destiny. Nobody has any veto powers or, stupid things. We cannot be kicked out. We have the majority on the board. And that's a very healthy balance. So even though we did scale very fast, and it was reasonable what we invested, but we never compromised on our ability to control the business.
Nice. I think that's a crucial part of, also driving the company forward in the future. And you did so. You got a lot of media attention with another supporter, Roger Federer, that you won over as investor and also as business partner. So first of all, how were you able to win him over, and why is it a good fit to On?
Yeah, so this is a little bit a Swiss story. I don't think it would have happened if he had not been a Swiss athlete. But basically, when Roger left Nike, he needed shoes, and he started buying shoes, and he started finally to buy what he really liked. And luckily, On was one of the brands that he liked. Mirka, his wife, was already wearing Ons early on, and probably told him, "Hey, these are super comfortable." So anyway, pictures started popping up on social media and in the press of Roger wearing Ons. And we were, of course, super honored. And I mean, he's one of the greatest sports people alive, or that ever lived. And, we knew somebody that knew someone that knew him. And we're like, hey, can't you tell Roger that he doesn't have to buy the stuff? I mean, we'd be happy to send him a pair every now and then. And that's how it started. And at some point, we got a call and it was like, hey, Roger's going to land, coming, I think, from Cincinnati. And on the way back from the airport, he would just like to meet you guys. You've been so friendly, and sending him shoes. He has 10 minutes. So he came and we spent about 2 hours talking, and we really connected. And then a little while later, he called and said, hey, you guys want to go for dinner? And we went for dinner. And it basically a friendship developed. And at some point, the idea came up, hey, why don't we work together? But at the same time, I mean, we were a lot smaller. This is only 2.5 years ago, but we were a lot smaller. And there was no way we could ever afford a sponsorship. Mm-hmm. So, the idea was, hey, like, if we can't afford to pay Roger, why don't we have Roger pay us? Now, joking aside, basically, the idea was, consumers today, they see through sponsorship. So basically, you have famous person A, brand B, and, they pay them a lot of money. Like Rihanna gets a lot of money from whomever, and she, goes on Instagram and says, like, this is the coolest stuff ever. It's very shallow. Now, Roger, with everything that he has achieved, he doesn't have to work anymore, and he can choose what he wants to do. And of course, he's also asked himself, what if I ever retire? So 20 years from now, he's no longer playing Wimbledon. What will he do? And he's very interested in being an entrepreneur. And we realized in our conversations, there is an opportunity that his journey and your own journey could come together. And we could have a lot of fun and actually, hopefully touch a lot of people in very positive ways. And that's how this then came about. And the start of the partnership and the reaction to the first product that we jointly developed are mind-blowing. It's much, much bigger than both him and us had ever expected. We're off to a good start. But I must also say, he's very impressive. How deeply he's involved, how smart he is, how he has a very clear vision of what he wants to do, not just on the tennis court, but also in business. And he's investing a lot more time than we ever hoped. And I mean, he's at the lab all the time, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going forward.
We're curious to see what's coming out of the lab pretty soon then. Mm-hmm. Let's also quickly talk about where you currently stand with On. You are available in more than 8,000 running stores in over 50 countries. And as you already said, have 10 to 12 million people wearing On shoes on the planet. I think that's a huge success. So we ask ourselves, what's next for you? Do you plan to do an IPO one day? Do you focus on, of course, new product developments? What's next for On?
We're always focused on what happens when a person, a consumer, a runner, interacts with On, whether it's through a product or through an engagement that we have. That's really what we care about. And in the end, when we started, we had the vision of reaching, basically giving everybody a better feeling when they're moving. So, that's where Put the Fun into the Run came about. Because for most people, if you tell them, hey, running or exercising, they wouldn't say it's fun. It's hard work and you're happy when you're done with it, but you're not enjoying the actual act. And we wanted to change that. And with On's technology, first in footwear, but now also across apparel, we're making things a little bit effortless. We're making it lighter, more agile, softer. And if you can get more people to move, I think we're making more people happy and maybe even the world just a tiny little bit a better place. So that's what we're striving for. Everything, the revenues, the profits, the business structure, the size of the office or not the office or whatever it is, that these are just tools and they will come and go. These are never goals. These are never aims. And we feel if you start aiming for I want the big office, or I want this or that. It's the wrong motivation. So whatever it takes to fulfill that goal, that over time most people will be wearing an On product and will be enjoying it. We'll take whatever it takes to get there. Awesome.
You have so many cool products, different shoes. What's your favorite pair of shoe?
I really like the hiking boots. They're light. They don't make me tired when I walk down the mountain. And as I said, I live in La Punt, so I have a lot of opportunity to wear them in all sorts of weather and conditions.
So before we conclude the episode, I have 2 more questions for you. Let's talk about your favorite resources and gadgets. Do you have any books or blogs, podcasts, or also tools that you use yourself on a regular basis that you can recommend to our listeners?
How I Built This is a podcast that I enjoy. Hopefully I will be on it one day. I think podcasts are great if you're traveling in the car or you're flying. I don't get around to listening to them too much. Also, I'd recommend not to read too many business books, because actually I do get sent business books every now and then, and some of them that I read and all the examples that are in there, these companies are all bankrupt today or not the great story anymore. So try to write your own story.
Awesome. I think that's a great recommendation. And we also planned some rapid fire questions for you. I either give you a short question or a selection of 2 to 3 options where you have to make one choice. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Europe, China, or the United States?
The United States, because people are just extremely friendly. They're very human. We're not talking about politics or the legal system, but they're also very resilient, and they will always find a way to get back up without complaining.
Right. Wealth or happiness?
Happiness.
Easy choice for you?
For sure.
What makes you smile?
My son, when he smiles at me, my wife, and nature, being out in the mountains or being on the ocean, and just appreciating a moment.
Nice. Where do you go to think?
I move. I do sports. Best time for me to think is on the bike. When I really have a difficult business problem to solve, I usually jump on the bike and I ride for hours, sometimes over several days. And I usually come back with a good idea. And it is not necessarily alone, but we always joke cycling is the new golf, or running. It works as well. And you go in a small group, and we actually have a lot of running and biking and even ski touring meetings at On.
And the last selection for you today, Zurich or La Punt?
La Punt.
Why?
Look, if I had a choice to make, if I would just spend the rest of my life in the Engadin or in any city in the world, I wouldn't have to think more than a second. It's definitely the Engadin.
Awesome. Caspar, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been an impressive journey that you shared with us, and we wish you and On all the best for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Stay connected with the Swisspreneur community through our LinkedIn and Instagram profiles. Make sure to subscribe to our show on whatever podcast platform you're using. See you next week for a brand new episode of the Swisspreneur Show.